This little dehumidifier here, there's a little story with it. I picked this up on Craigslist, and I ended up fixing it. And I'm gonna give you get a little religious on you for a minute. I learned in life that sometimes God knows the end of the story, and we don't know the end of the story, and we have to just go with it until we get to the end. So I was looking for a dehumidifier on Craigslist. I found one. I went to see it. It was interesting. I met the wife was half, I think, Bulgarian and half Russian. The husband was Russian, and we tried it out. I plugged it in, tried it for a minute or two. I turned it off, and I didn't see nothing getting wet, no dripping or anything. So the wife was kind of like, maybe, we had it for like a year, we didn't use it, it was my parents or something. And I tried it again, still no dripping. Actually, the second time the compressor probably wasn't even running, because it has a special feature that I didn't even know that. So anyway, no water dripping. So I'm thinking, I don't think this thing works. She's like, okay, why don't you just take it for nothing, I'm sorry and everything. So I'm like, now, I should have thought it through. Okay, but the first thought that came to my head was, alright, I'll take it home tonight. I'll try it thoroughly. And if it does work, I'll come back and give you the money for it. So I took it home. I ran it for a long time. Nothing. Then I opened the thing up, and I finally got to the evaporator coil, and it was warm. It wasn't getting chilly and cold and no condensation. So the thing definitely wasn't working. So I emailed her back that I checked it thoroughly. It's not working. So she said sorry, but I paid nothing for it. But now I'm thinking, why do they bring this piece of junk home? It doesn't work. I wanted one working, not working. But now the story got a little better, because somewhere along here I saw this tag that says it's R410A. So I'm like, wow, 410A, that's a little more modern. It's not an old one. And so that kind of is what got me triggered. So then I was like, okay, I had bought previously some ports, a screw-on port and also braze-on ports for these small units, because they don't have any ports on them. And so I took it to my house, and I said, maybe I'll just play around with this thing, because it's 410A, and I actually do have a bottle of 410A, and 410A supposedly doesn't hurt the environment or the atmosphere, so that's a good thing about it. If it was an R22, I probably wouldn't mess with it. So I did a few steps with it, and I have those in video clips which follow, and I trimmed them a little bit. They'll follow if you're interested in seeing the step-by-step of how I went through this. But lo and behold, I ended up getting the thing working again. So like I said, sometimes it's like you don't see the whole picture, but it turned out to be a pretty cool story, that it's free and I got it working. So it's like it worked out. But at one point I was bummed out. I was like, oh, now I got to get rid of this stupid thing. But no, it was an opportunity to fix something. So if you want to watch the rest of the video, there's no more religion, and it's just about how I went through it step by step, and I did a pretty good job, except for the burning and melting of plastic inside this thing. And I was really surprised that it went back together, and it does work. And it works well. It takes actually, here's another thing. It takes a while to get dripping, so that I didn't really do the right thing at first, and taking it home and trying it thoroughly was a good idea. But now I see that it takes a while to get dripping, but once it gets dripping, I think this works better than my other dehumidifier. It's, so that's about it. And the only other thing I'm going to say is I also saw a spec on here in the back here it said about the pressure, the low and high pressure, and I think it said the high pressure is like 490 psi and the low pressure is like 300 psi. That is not realistic. You would never have a low pressure of 300 psi. It could be that that's what the unit is tested for in terms of pressure. You know, they pressure test it to make sure it's not leaking, maybe. But that's not an operating pressure. The operating pressure of 300 psi would be like 80 or 90 degrees or maybe more, which would not work as a dehumidifier. So it's the actual operating pressure on this is about 125 psi to maybe 150 max, and that's going to create a coil temperature of about 45 degrees, which is perfect for making condensation but not freezing. So that's something that I just kind of know beyond what the label said. But 410A is pretty cool. Alright, another little crazy project I got myself into. I should mind my business, so just run from these projects. But anyway, this is a dehumidifier that's not working. It runs. The compressor gets pretty hot after a while, but no water drips out. These don't get cold enough to make condensation. I touch this, it gets slightly cool. So I had these tools I had ordered. I never used them. I said this is a good time to try it out. So these little units have no ports that you can screw AC gauges onto. So they make these ports that you can attach, and they puncture the line, and then you can use a port. That's the port right there. The idea is then you could charge, or you could read how much pressure's in there. That's what I want to do. And then but unfortunately now you have a line with a hole in it. So what I'm trying to do is to verify that there's like no refrigerant or very little, and then I would basically try charging a little bit of refrigerant in there and try to find the leak, see if it's something I could fix. If I could fix the leak, then what I could do is I could remove this. A little bit is going to escape, and then I could put a T in there, and I could put a port in, you know, solder in or braze in a port, and that would be a permanent, that would be like a permanent change, you know, and not to leave this adapter in here. Or you could leave the adapter in here, but it may be leaking slightly over time anyway. So that's the idea, is to now I screwed this all the way in, so hopefully I punctured the line. Now if I open it up, I should be able to start reading the pressure in the system and see if it's low, like I think. Then I could try putting a little bit of refrigerant in, find the leak, fix the leak. Then I could adapt this to an actual port with a T, and then I could charge it up and see if it's fixed, see if it works. But I do not expect this project to go too well. Here's the little compressor, and this is an R410A, so supposedly it's not bad for the environment, but you're still never supposed to release refrigerant into the atmosphere. It only takes, I think, about a pound of refrigerant, so we'll see. Okay, here's the update. This thing worked beautifully. I screwed it all the way in. I didn't hear a peep out of a leak. Now I unscrewed it all the way out. Still no leaking, no problem so far. This was 0 pressure. I opened up this valve, and it barely got itself up to if that's 0, that's about 15 psi. So there's like literally almost no refrigerant in this thing. It's completely out. So far the experiment is good. The next step would be to put a little bit of pressure in there, and then to see if I can get it to find the leak. So now I need to get my leak detector and whatnot and see what happens. But so far we're not risking refrigerant losses and big problems like that. Well, now I just might have found the leak. So I put a little bit of pressure into it. maybe like an ounce, not even an ounce of refrigerant. And I looked around, I didn't find anything, but when you're looking and you're searching, then you start to see things. So down here I see some rust or corrosion right at the beginning of the cold coil, the evaporator. So I see the rust there, and I did put the instrument there, and I have had some activity. So it's not, you know, if I fully charge it up, I'm pretty sure it's going to be really obvious there. I'm assuming that's the thing. The leak detector did help me. Now, I would almost give up immediately on this, but I realize a potential solution is this is the beginning of the loop, or the series of loops. So this goes underneath, and it comes out on the top, and then it wraps around to this here, and then it comes here to here, from here to here, here to here, all the way up and down and out. So I could actually bypass, I could move this first port here down into here, into like the third. That's like the first tube, that's the second tube, that's the third tube. So I could move from the first tube to the third tube and use that as my first, and then those would be empty. Or I could uncoil this thing here and wrap it around and pop it in the end of the second tube, and then I would use the second tube to the third tube coming back, and I'd only lose the first tube, but then I'd have to uncoil this whole coil. So this is a possible way to fix this, maybe. I'd have to see if I could heat it and pull it out. I don't know about that. See, you can see the corrosion right down in there. That's where I think the leak is, at the bottom there where the corrosion is. This thing does work nice. It already started getting cold here with just barely any refrigerant at all. Well, it looks like it might be the end of a project. The torch is way too much heat to be in the vicinity of plastic. You can see I totally smoked it and melted it and whatever, had fire. And heating this up, you tend to burn a hole right through it where you're heating it before you loosen it up to come out. So I still haven't learned how to do that. I guess you have to move the torch around a lot and not leave it in one place, and there might be more than I know. I don't know. Anyway, I don't do it right. I burn holes. I ruined them all. This one actually is possibly fixable. You know, it goes in right there. I'd have to cut this off a little bit, swage a piece over here, make a bend, and maybe I could get that together. I don't know. But for now, I'm going to call it quits. I'm going to go on to mow the lawn. Okay, here's the update. Okay, so I kind of ruined it. It's all burned, melted, and smelly, probably poisonous. And I didn't do a good job. I burned holes in the tubing, but I realized this one wasn't tube shot. A piece of it's chewed off. But I thought, let me see if I could bend a piece of copper, swage out the end to fit in there, and swage it to fit over this other piece and try. So I did. And I was able to braze it in with more melting plastic and smoke and fire. But it looks like it actually is brazed in. This one came nice. The oxyacetylene torch, you just have to put it there a little bit, and then it's hot enough, it sucks it in and melts it in. So then I put a little twist here. I'm pretty sure this is now outside the body, and this is in the wrong place. So I have problems, but I don't really care. You know, it's gonna probably goes to the dump. So the next thing is, well, I gotta verify if it's sealing before you put refrigerant. So what I did was I had to get my vacuum pump, which I kind of forgot how to use. So basically I just took the rubber hose and fit it over this like nipple here, and it was enough. I got it down to -20 like inches of mercury, and then I closed off the valve so I could take the pump off and close this up, and I'm letting it sit to see if it's gonna leak. And if it's not leaking, maybe it's fixed. I don't know. I should have done the vacuum test before I did anything else, just to see if that other previous leak would have showed up on the vacuum. I didn't do that. Too late. So here's the silver rod for copper, maybe brass, but copper for sure. I got it at -20 now. I'll check it later or tomorrow. If it holds, I might just shoot a little more refrigerant in it and see if it works. And then I'm not going to fill it. It's only a stupid 8 ounces of refrigerant. I shouldn't be worried about it. It may work. But this is not real pretty. So I figured out that these tubes, this end are the unions. These little half 180-degree turns are unions, which the ends are swage and they fit in. The tubings, it's just basically copper tubing. It goes all the way through and then it curves and comes back. That's one piece of tubing with a 180 bend in it, and then it's 180 unions at the other end, and it's swaged. I don't know where the leak was. It could have been the well, it was from the corrosion, but I don't know if it went through the copper or it went through the brazing. I really don't know. So who knows? But it's just an experiment, playing around. But that's how this worked. And then these aluminum fins, this is actually one of the fins here, which is kind of all pressed. And the copper tubes just go right through. And the fins are like I said, they were pressed. And when you look down them, it looks like it's threads of a nut, but it's just each fin that has that. I can't think of the word. It's like pressed over. So that's how that all works. So it's just U-tubes, long U's and short U's. So that's it. But next time I have to learn that when you take these out, you have to put a little heat here, a little heat, move the heat around a lot, and then pull it out. Don't just, if you leave the heat in one spot, you burn a hole right through it before it's gonna come free. So that's it. Okay, I'm back to working on the dehumidifier, and to put this port in, I was going to do it a stupid way, but then I decided I'd do a T-fitting. I went to the store, and the 1/4-inch T-fitting, which may have fit, I don't know if it would have fit for sure, it was like $8. I said, screw that, I ain't spending $8 on a stupid 2-cent item. So I'm trying to make my own fitting, and it's also actually smarter. I'm away from the dehumidifier. I'm trying to braze this. I cut this little piece of tubing. I swaged it out just slightly to fit over that tube. A full swage would have been too much of a gap. And now I have this thing. I'm filing it from both sides to fit kind of nice. I think that's good. And I'm going to try to braze that together to make the T. And then I'll slide that on there and braze it onto that. That's my attempt. I've filed it a little bit here to clean it up, and the heat from the brazing actually cleans it up. You don't need flux. Copper on copper. If it's brass, you do need flux. I may put another port here for the high pressure side if this works good, but first I'll test it for vacuum to make sure that this braze worked. But that's where we're at. slightly swaged, filed, cleaned. I was thinking of putting like another layer, like a washer almost over there, but I think I'll just try this for now and see if I can build it up. Well, here's my setup. Slight gap, very tiny gap. I think that looks good. So it's clean enough, especially for brazing. I think we'll try it and set up the torch now and get started. Okay, so I got the valve or port attached to this piece of tubing. I made my own T. This sprays here was really nice, but then I tried to add more and it kind of bubbled, so I don't know if that was any good or not, but I'm going to trust it. So now I'm about to braze in here and here, and then I'll try to test it for vacuum. Well, my first attempt is a failure with the vacuum test. It won't hold any vacuum, and I think it's because I didn't get the braze behind here, either that side or that side. I think it's the back that's giving me the problem. Hopefully it's not around here or here or somewhere else, but so I'm going to try to redo the braze on it and get that back area. Well, that was it. I re-brazed it, getting the heat in the back area, and I tried the vacuum, and now it's normal. It's starting to draw vacuum and holding it. So that was all it was. Okay, very good, not bad. 1 for 2 is pretty good. I don't think I had the camera on that. I never checked that. Alright, that's it. Alright, this is the vacuum test right now. I got it to minus 25 inches of mercury, and that needle is steady. When I started off, like it might get to say 5, and then it would drop to 4. That's when it's kind of bubbles are coming out of the oil or whatever, or maybe, or maybe there's a little moisture in the line, so it's vaporizing, but now it's been stable. But it takes a lot of pumps just to move it 1 inch of mercury. It is steady at 25. The problem is when I disconnect the hose, it's going to suck atmosphere right back up into the system. So actually it's dropping a fraction of an inch. Could be the hose. Yeah, it is dropping slightly. What I should really do is put the valve in and then put a connector. Yeah, we're dropping a little bit. I don't know what's but it's going to draw. It's inevitable that it's going to draw. Atmosphere, so I'm going to have to re-evacuate it when I put the valve in and before I put refrigerant. So let's let it go. We let it go. There it goes. Okay, so I put the Schrader valve inside the port, and I attached this valve here. So now I pumped the vacuum down to like minus 20, I think. Yeah, 20 or 21. And I have it closed off, so I'm letting it sit. And the good thing about this now is that I won't lose the vacuum when I go to add refrigerant. I can put the refrigerant line on and let it seep out, and then open it up, and the vacuum will draw it in, which is great. So that's a good thing. But I'm going to check the vacuum a little more, and I'm going to try to pump it down a little more. But it takes a lot of work to get. If I get to 25, that's all I'm not going to go for any better than that. But first I want to make sure I didn't lose any. Okay, what can I say? I think it's trickling a little bit. The vacuum, I think, is dropping, trickling. I can only guess it might be here, down at that problem. But it could also be this connection here now. So I really don't know. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put some refrigerant in it. Only what I have left in the tube basically. Try to bring it up to maybe 100 psi. And then I'm going to see if I can sniff it here. And I may also see if I can try to get it running to where it works, and then like if I see it right away leaking or sniffing, if it sniffs it right away, then I'm just going to leave it as dead, But if it's good, I may put a little more in and see if I can get it to run, and then keep checking to see if there's a leak, because there really may not be a leak at this point, but there might be. So instead of just doing vacuum, I'm going to refrigerant. Well, she's running. I put some refrigerant in it, and I checked it with the sniffer, and there were a couple false alarms, like if you put it near this tube that had refrigerant, it'll start triggering it there. But I ran it, I moved it around. It did trigger nicely by one of these fittings that was a little bit loose. Tightened it up, and then that went away. I checked my brazers here, never a problem here. This one, there were a few, like I said, there were a few false warnings, but then when I rechecked it, no problem. I put more refrigerant in it, and still no problem. And now as I was adding refrigerant, the pressure was in the freezing range, so this was frosted up. And then I added a little more, and it got it above the freezing range, and I saw the frost turn to dew. So it's actually working exactly what I would expect, or what I read, what I read. It's doing what they say it does. So it I think there's a possibility it is fixed. There is water collecting on here, drips. There are drips coming down. I have yet to see it forming a puddle anywhere. I don't know where it's going, if it is actually dripping out of it. I checked the back. It's not wet there. It's not wet in the bottom. So I'm going to let it run a little while. But as far as I'm concerned, I think with the sniffer not finding a leak, I don't think there's a leak. I think it's actually fixed. But it could leak again, or it could be leaking. I don't know. Well, it's really working. That wet is the dehumidifier dripping. I had this uncorked at the back, and it was spilling out. And now I see there's a puddle inside of this contraption, because it's kind of cockeyed. If I turn it, I'll probably start filling up the container, maybe, hopefully. But it is definitely working. It's full of dew all around the evaporator, and this is a little warm running, but this is supposed to run hot. I should check the temperature of that, the compressor. Yeah, there's water inside there. This also has a pump. If this fills up, it'll wait for you to pump it out. I'm not going to try that. And what's the next thing? I guess that's it.